Right now, Trump is demanding Carney's resignation. Washington is absolutely really from Canada's response. It started at 9:23 a.m. Eastern today inside a closed door White House session. We just witnessed an event unprecedented in 78 years of transatlantic history. It happened during a phone call with Donald Trump that lasted exactly 14 minutes and 31 seconds. According to three sources in the room, Trump didn't just drop a hint. He explicitly demanded that Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney quit his job immediately. No subtext, no suggestions, a direct order. The fallout in Ottawa is already the biggest diplomatic crisis since the War of 1812. You need to understand the gravity of what I'm about to tell you. What happened in the last 6 hours goes way beyond politics. This is a test of whether allied democracies can actually stay independent when the world's superpower decides otherwise. When the US decides foreign votes and leaders don't matter. If you're worried about the global order collapsing in the next 72 hours, get in this channel right now. Turn on those notifications because this is breaking in real time. We're finding out if US power has any limits or if the president now thinks he can hire and fire foreign heads of state. Here's the intel. Three separate sources, two from the NSC and one senior aide to the Secretary of State, have confirmed the exact timeline of this morning's chaos. Trump initiated the call at 9:07 a.m. from the Oval Office. It was totally off the books, no agenda. Just a raw call according to the summary I got less than 4 hours ago. He kicked it off by blasting Prime Minister Carney's economic strategy. Specifically, he said Carney's refusal to cut rates alongside the Fed was a direct threat to American financial security. All three sources say the vibe turned toxic within 3 minutes. Trump told Carney, and I'm quoting the Situation Room logs directly here, that unless Carney resigned within 48 hours to let a friendlier government take over, the U.S. would unleash what Trump called, quote, financial measures that would force Canada to rethink its entire existence next to the U.S. Let me break down exactly what happened next and why every expert I've talked to is screaming regime crisis. They're using words like catastrophic and unprecedented. Check the flight tracking on Flight Radar 24. A Canadian government jet scrambled out of Ottawa. It left McDonald Cartier International at 11:42 a.m., barely 2.5 hours after Trump hung up. That jet wheels down to Joint Base Andrews at 12:58 p.m. Canada's foreign minister was on that flight racing to the State Department for what insiders are calling the most hostile meeting between these two nations in modern history. This isn't speculation. I've reconstructed this from people who were brief minutes after that showdown ended. Here is exactly how this went down. The timeline is everything here. This wasn't random. It was a calculated escalation of bad choices and deliberate provocation. It started Tuesday, February 18th. Mark Carney, fresh off a landslide victory and only 47 days into his term, rolled out a massive economic roadmap to the Canadian Parliament. The core idea, keep interest rates higher than the U.S. Federal Reserve to crush inflation specific to the Canadian market. He's targeting the insane housing bubbles in Toronto and Vancouver. Remember, Carney ran the Bank of England. He is one of the most respected central bankers on the planet. He made it crystal clear Canada sets its own economic policy based on reality, not on what the U.S. Fed decides to do. Fast forward to Thursday, February 20th. 2 days later, Trump holds a cabinet meeting in the Roosevelt Room. Two sources confirm he called Carney's plan a betrayal of the North American market. Trump ordered his economic team to cook up pressure tactics to force Canada into line. One source said Trump was shockingly blunt about it. He literally said, quote, "We control their market and they must recall that." Then on Saturday, February 22nd at 6:47 a.m., Trump posted on Truth Social. People shrugged it off as typical venting, but looking back, it was the first shot of a war. The post read Mark Carney is ruining the Canadian market with extreme high interest rates, hurting diligent Canadians. Many represent he ought to step down and allow somebody who grasps economics to assume control. The U.S. will not sit by while our partner commits economic suicide. That post got 847,000 likes in 6 hours. Right-wing media jumped on it, painting Carney as an enemy of America. Then came Monday, February 24th. The insult went global. At a White House manufacturing event, Trump went off script, stared right into the camera and said, "Mark Carney, if you're watching, you're fired. Except I can't fire him because he works for Canada. But if I could, I would. He's a disaster. Bad for Canada, bad for the U.S. The Canadians deserve better." That clip played on every major network. Within 2 hours, the Canadian embassy in D.C. clapped back with a memo reminding the White House that Canada is a sovereign country and that their prime minister is picked by Canadian voters, not appointed by foreign powers. That was 4 days ago. Now here's where it gets dangerous. Sources with ties to both administrations say Trump didn't see that reply as a defense of democracy. He saw it as defiance that needed to be crushed. From Monday night to Wednesday morning, Trump held 3 meetings with trade advisors plotting tariffs on Canadian goods. One source described the vibe. Trump kept asking, what hurts them the most, and how fast can we do it? That leads us to 9:07 this morning when Trump decided suggesting wasn't enough. He demanded it. Let me explain who Mark Carney actually is, because this isn't some random politician chasing clout. He is arguably the most qualified economist running a G7 nation. In the last 30 years, easily, Carney ran the Bank of Canada from 2008 to 2013. He steered them through the crash so well, Canada was the only G7 nation to keep its AA credit rating through the entire meltdown. Then he ran the Bank of England until 2020, handling Brexit chaos. Both conservatives and Labour respected the guy. He's got degrees from Harvard and Oxford. He wrote the book on financial stability. when he entered politics and won the Liberal leadership. In December, the world saw it as Canada hiring a genius to navigate a messy global economy. This is not a man who reacts well to being told by a foreign leader to pack his bags. And Canada isn't a country that lets Washington dictate its internal politics. They've been independent since 1867. They've fought beside the U.S. in every major war since World War I. They are our biggest trading partner, $718 billion a year. And now, for the first time ever, an American president has directly ordered their elected leader to resign. If you're getting value from this, smash that like button because this story is about to get way more complicated. The Canadian ambassador joined the foreign minister sitting across from the Secretary of State for an hour and 23 minutes. A source briefed on the meeting says, the Canadian foreign minister opened with a hard line. Canada absolutely rejects any suggestion that its prime minister should resign to satisfy a foreign government. The minister then delivered what insiders are describing as the most aggressive diplomatic cable Ottawa has ever fired off to Washington during peacetime. According to my source, this message broke down into three hard-hitting points. First off, Canada interprets Trump's push for Carney's resignation as an unparalleled violation of Canadian sovereignty and direct meddling in their democratic systems. Secondly, Ottawa refuses to adjust its economic game plan based on threats or ultimatums from any foreign power, the United States included. Thirdly, if the U.S. moves forward with any economic punishment against Canada for ignoring this demand, the Canadians will fire back with immediate retaliatory measures and intend to drag this mess in front of the UN, the G7, NATO, and every other global stage where American respect for ally sovereignty is up for debate. The Secretary of State, my source tells me, looked visibly rattled during the meeting, noting at one point that the president's comments don't always reflect actual U.S. policy and that diplomatic lines remain open to fix any trade issues. But here's the kicker that really worries me. The Canadian foreign minister reportedly clapped back, saying Trump's call this morning wasn't an international disagreement. It was an attempted regime change in a G7 democracy. And Canada's answer is simple. The United States doesn't get to pick who runs Canada. Smash that subscribe button if you want to keep up with this crisis, because the fallout is going to be massive and mainstream news is lagging 3 hours behind everything I'm showing you. But wait, there's an even darker layer I haven't mentioned yet. At 3:34 p.m., less than 2 hours after that State Department meeting wrapped up, Prime Minister Carney held an emergency presser in Ottawa that went live across the nation and streamed to the world. Standing at a podium in the House of Commons, Carney delivered a 7-minute speech that political experts in Canada are already calling the boldest declaration of independence from American influence in modern times. Carney kicked things off by confirming he got a call from President Trump this morning where the president suggested Carney should think about quitting. Then Carney dropped the hammer, and I want you to hear his exact words because this is a turning point. Canada is an independent nation. Our government is selected by Canadian voters in free and fair elections. No foreign leader, no matter how powerful, has the right to demand the resignation of Canada's prime minister. I was elected by the people of Canada 47 days ago with a clear mission to chase economic policies that help Canadians. I intend to finish that job. Our economic strategy will stay under our control based on what the Canadian market needs. We will not surrender our economic freedom to threats or ultimatums from anyone. The room exploded with applause from Canadian lawmakers across the aisle. Conservative Party leaders who usually fight Carney's Liberals on basically everything put out statements within the hour showing total support for Carney's defense of their sovereignty. The opposition leader stated, "We disagree with Prime Minister Carney on a lot of things, but on this, Canadians are united. We choose our Prime Minister, not Washington." And it gets crazier. At 4:52 p.m., the European Union issued a statement through their foreign affairs chief flagging concerns about reports of U.S. interference in the democratic systems of partner nations and doubling down on the EU's belief that democratic governments answer to their own citizens, not outside powers. At 5:18 p.m., the UK Foreign Secretary dropped a carefully worded memo emphasizing the need to respect the independence and democratic structures of all nations in the rules-based order. What you are watching right now is America's tightest allies, publicly rejecting in real time the idea that the U.S. has any right to call for regime change in fellow democracies. This isn't just a little diplomatic spat. This is the bedrock of the post-war alliance system starting to fracture over one core question. Does American power have any limits, or has it completely detached from the norms, institutions, and mutual respect that have led the free world for 78 years? Make sure you are subscribed with notifications on because this story is far from finished. When Canada reveals its counterpunches, when the G7 holds its emergency session, when NATO allies start second-guessing U.S. leadership, you will get the deep dive analysis right here first. David Cohen, a former U.S. ambassador to Canada who served 3 administrations, told CNN this afternoon something that should wake everyone up. He said, and I am quoting here, "In 40 years of watching U.S.-Canada relations, I have never seen anything remotely close to an American president demanding a Canadian PM resign. This breaks every rule of international conduct and mutual respect. If this becomes standard, if U.S. leaders think they can just order allied leaders to step down, the entire structure of democratic cooperation collapses." Rebecca Winters, a constitutional law professor at Yale who specializes in global relations, said on a panel tonight that Trump's demand represents what she calls democratic imperialism, the idea that American preferences override the voting choices of other democracies. She highlighted that if the U.S. goes ahead with sanctions against Canada for ignoring this order, it would mark the first time in modern history that America has punished an ally for standing up for its democratic sovereignty. Here's what I'm keeping an eye on over the next 48 hours that could blow this whole thing wide open. Number one, whether Trump follows through on his threat of economic attacks against Canada. Sources are whispering that trade advisors are writing up an executive order to slap tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and lumber, potentially hitting $87 billion in annual trade. If Trump signs that paper, Canada has already prepped a retaliation package targeting U.S. farm exports from politically sensitive swing states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Number two, will other G7 leaders come out publicly to back Canada, or will they stay quiet? Silence from traditional friends would signal that democracies are too scared to challenge American overreach, even when it threatens their own freedom. Number three, does this mess impact the upcoming NATO summit next month? Canada is a founding member and a crucial player in North American defense. If this heats up, Canadian officials might use the NATO stage to ask bigger questions about whether an alliance led by a nation demanding regime change in partner democracies has any credibility left. The next 72 hours will determine if this is just a short-lived drama solved by diplomats or the beginning of a permanent break in how the United States deals with its democratic friends. Let me wrap this up because we are running out of time and the clock is ticking faster than most realize. What went down today isn't a one-off event. It is the logical next step of a U.S. power doctrine that accepts no boundaries, respects no principles, and sees no difference between enemies and friends. When the President of the United States thinks he can call up a foreign leader and order them to quit, and when that leader says no and the President threatens economic pain, you are witnessing the collapse of the order that has prevented major wars for nearly 8 decades. Let me break down the 3 paths we are looking at now. Scenario 1, the walk back. 20% probability here, facing a united front from Canada, quiet heat from Europe, and warnings from his own State Department that this risks the whole alliance. Trump releases some face-saving comment claiming he was misunderstood or just giving friendly advice. Carney stays put, keeps his economic policy, and the crisis fades out. But even in this best-case version, the damage is done. Every Democratic ally now knows the American president thinks he has the right to demand their resignation, and that knowledge changes the alliance forever. Scenario 2, the trade war. 45% probability. Trump moves forward with tariffs on Canadian goods. Canada hits back immediately with their pre-planned revenge package. Trade between the two countries, which supports millions of jobs on both sides, tanks. U.S. manufacturers relying on Canadian imports face supply chain chaos. Canadian shoppers face higher prices on American stuff. The economic pain hits both countries hard. But the political pain focuses on Trump, who is now fighting a trade war with America's closest neighbor and biggest trading partner. Republican politicians in border states start getting calls from CEOs demanding this emergency gets fixed. This path likely ends with a grudging de-escalation, after both sides take a financial hit, but U.S.-Canada relations are basically poisoned for years. Scenario 3, the alliance split. 40% probability. This is the outcome that should terrify anyone who understands how the post-war world works. Ottawa isn't blinking and the White House isn't backing down. The sanctions hammer has dropped and Canada is taking this straight to the United Nations, wielding Article 2 like a weapon to defend their right to exist. Across the Atlantic, our European allies are already fed up, openly asking if the United States is still a shield or if it has become a liability. The entire Group of 7 summit is being hijacked by this absolute chaos. Forget about containing China or Russia. NATO members are too busy panicking, wondering if they can trust an alliance led by a man who blackmails his own partners over trade disputes. This isn't a Hollywood explosion. It is a slow-motion car crash that you cannot undo. American leadership isn't dying on the battlefield. It is committing moral suicide, and that is why this matters way more than just today's headlines. We are talking about way more than who gets to sit in the Canadian Prime Minister's chair or the price of lumber. This is about whether sovereign nations are actually allowed to stay free. Has Washington become so arrogant that the president thinks foreign elections are just his personal playthings? If he can order a regime change in Canada and threaten to burn their economy to the ground for saying no, then what is stopping him from holding that same gun to Mexico's head or Europe's or any other democracy that dares to disagree with his playbook? If we normalize this, if we accept that a U.S. president can just pick up the phone and fire a foreign leader, then democracy is dead, replaced by American imperial will. I know a lot of you are watching this and feeling completely powerless, but here is step 1, blow up the phone lines of your representatives, especially if you live near the border or in a trade-heavy state. Tell them point blank that bullying our allies into submission is not on the menu. Remind them that Congress has the power and the duty to check a president who goes rogue. Step 2, spread this video everywhere. Most people are sleepwalking through this crisis. The mainstream media is hours behind the curve, treating this like standard political drama instead of a dagger to the heart of the Western alliance. Step 3, watch the world stage. If Europe stays silent, if they choose to kiss the ring rather than defend the basic right of a nation to choose its own leader, then you know exactly where the free world is headed. Smash that subscribe button right now because the next 72 hours are going to be insane and I will be breaking it down for you before the spin doctors try to bury the truth. We are watching the global order either survive or crumble in real time. The stakes are through the roof, the danger is obvious, and honestly, no one knows how this ends. Sound off in the comments below. Does Canada hold the line or do they fold under the financial crush? Which way do you think the wind blows? I am reading everything you guys post, and I want to know the vibe in your circles. Is anyone else paying attention or is everyone missing the big picture? Tell me what I missed. This is the moment of truth where we find out if sovereignty actually means anything anymore.